Let's see, this is week 2 and the end of a little kind of two-part series that we're calling Legacy. Legacy. And the word itself, it's I think the best way I can describe it or define it is it's living a life that outlives me. Living a life that outlives me. And last week we talked about our life sentence. Our life's sentence. So our purpose, defining, putting a target. A lot of people, I think, accept their lives. They don't lead their lives. And legacy is being intentional with the time, the talent, the treasure that we have. We talked a lot about that last week. But it's almost, if we could, in one way, is we're writing out our life sentence. And we're living towards that, whatever that may be. And thinking about that this week, I left last week, and the message. I go home and I just start thinking about all the things that I shouldn't have said, and then all the things that I should have said. I don't know if you do that too, but I was just thinking, my life sentence has been pretty rocky. Like if I was to boil it down and look back through my life and write the legacy, I can't say that I have lived towards a common purpose my entire life. If you'd asked me in my teenage years what my life sentence was, there would have been a few cuss words in it, probably. I don't even know what I would have said. And then once I became a Christian around 17, 18, my senior year of high school. And then, that brought a little direction in my life, but still what was really important to me was I just wanted to make enough money so that I could just surf all the time. You know what I mean? Like that would have been my life sentence. My first semester in a community college my major was meteorology. I just wanted to study the weather because surfing is dependent on the weather and just try to rotate my whole life around this thing called surfing. That was my life sentence for a little bit. And then it changed. I started really wanting to start a family, and I met at the time, started dating my now wife. And so if you'd asked me in those years what my life sentence would have been, it was, to provide for my family and prepare a place for would be my bride, eventually, and have children and all this stuff. But even in the last 10 years, it's changed a ton. I went got a little bit of Bible college in 18, 19, 20, and couldn't really find a place that I felt like I was supposed to go work full time. So I worked at Pepsi for about 10 years. And if you'd asked me in that time what my life sentence would have been, my sights were set at climbing the corporate ladder. I wanted to be the operations manager or the general manager, or the people that I was looking up to in my life at the time. I wanted to do that. That was my goal. And then with church and ministry and things like that, it's like a moving target. And so I've been thinking about that, and I don't know if there's a better model for us when it comes to living a legacy and defining our lives and what we're going to give our lives to than the one that we worship. And we celebrate his coming, right? It's Advent season, and it's a beautiful season. But I think if we were to show up in Jesus' life when he was in his teenage years, he was in a wood shop making chairs. Or he was building furniture. And then towards the, kind of later in his late 20s, early 30s, was when the legacy kind of shifted from making furniture to his ministry began. But I think the common theme here, and what we're going to look at today, is I want to look at the life of Jesus and how he found his legacy and walked in his purpose. Because more than just him being the Son of God, the way that he lived his life is, I think, the best way that we can live our lives. There's not a better model out there. There's a ton of leadership stuff on how to live your life, and a ton of Christian books on purpose-driven life, and how do we find our calling? How do we define our legacy and live towards it? There's a lot of good stuff on that. But I think the best thing we can do is read between the lines in the life of Jesus. And how did he do that? How did he live towards his purpose in the short life that he had, 33 years? How did he do that? And there's a moment in his ministry, and we're going to look at just a few verses where he's with his disciples. So he's out of the wood shop now, and he's doing ministry. And by the way, his ministry began kind of on accident. It wasn't like something that there was no timeline to it. They ran out of wine at a wedding. Okay, that's a problem. All right, that's how his ministry began. There was, and they came to Mary, his mother, and said, "Well, we're out of wine. This is a problem." They would have wedding feasts for days. They would party, and they were out of wine. And then she said, "Well, hey, just listen to him talking about Jesus." And he turned water into wine, and that began what's known as his season of miracles. So it wasn't, I don't know if it was something that was premeditated. It was, the timing happened. And so where we are today in our text, we're going to look at Matthew 16. Matthew 16. And Jesus gathers his disciples around, and he asks them this question: who do people say that I am? Jesus asked a lot of questions, but that's one of the questions that, why did he ask it? Was he genuinely curious? When it comes to defining, living our legacy, if legacy is living a life that outlives me, at some point we got to ask ourselves that. What's the word on the street about me? Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Do people say I'm a good boss, or am I a bad boss? Do people say I'm a good employee? I'm a bad. I think that's really what Jesus is asking here. Who do people say that I am? Let's read it together. Matthew 16, verse 13. Jesus came to a region in Philippi, and he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say that, you're John the Baptist. Others say you're Elijah. Still others, maybe Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you?" he asked, looking at the disciples. "Who do you say that I am?" And only one was brave enough to speak up, Peter. He said, "You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. This was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but my Father which is in heaven." So Jesus is asking a legacy question here about his own life. Here he is, he's about 8 months from the cross here. So it was the summer in his calendar, and April would be the resurrection. And so this is about right now. It was summer or fall when this was happening. So Jesus knew that the cross was coming in 8-10 months. That's all he had left. And so he genuinely, I think, wanted to know, what are people saying about me? Who do people say that I am? And the disciples, like any good employees, didn't probably shoot straight with him. Because the real word on the street about Jesus was the G-rated version. That he was John the Baptist and Elijah or Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Those were good people. The Pharisees in Matthew 12 called him a demon at one point. That he was doing all this work he was tapping into evil to cast out evil. Isaiah 53 says that he was a man of sorrows. He was rejected and despised by the people around him. Now, hang on a second. Here is Jesus, the Son of God. I don't think there's anyone that ever lived more in smack dab in the middle of God's purpose for his life. And most of the world around him had no idea who he was. And when I say when it comes to living your legacy and defining your life sentence, there's going to be seasons in your life where you may not even know what it is. And then there's going to be seasons in your life where you're right in the middle of living exactly what God's called you to do, living your legacy, and everybody around you is trying to get you to be somebody else. or they're throwing stones at you, or they're trying to get you to stop living your purpose. You got to remember, there's a real enemy out there. The last thing he wants is for you to walk in God's will for your life. And so if we really study the life of Jesus, it was really hard for Jesus to be Jesus. Because the people that he came for, which were the Pharisees, those were the ones that disliked him the most. Like the church of the time, the organized church of that day were the ones who were causing the most grief in his life. That's why they always said, man, you just hang out with sinners, because they were nicer to him. They accused him of being drunk. All you hang out with is all these crazy people, because those were really the ones, I think, that truly understood who he was. And so you, here in the 21st century, when it comes to walking and right slap in the purpose that God has for you, it doesn't exempt you from being misunderstood. Because there's going to be times in your life where you're doing exactly what God's called you to do, and there may be some people that don't agree with it, or they don't see it. They don't understand it. One of our trustees, and I didn't tell him I was going to tell this story, but he's a doctor, chiropractor, started a couple practices in his life, but there was a point in his life where he felt like God was telling him to shut his practice down and go on the mission field. Now, that sounds great, right? Yeah, let's do it. But that means living off of 1 month's pay as a doctor the whole year. That's what you get paid as a missionary, is beans and rice. Come on, somebody. Now, how many of you would get excited about that? How many of you, how do you know on paper that makes absolutely 0 sense? When I first felt God calling me to do this, there was a few people in my life that I really, really wanted to be okay with it. And the ones that I really was looking to for affirmation thought that it was the worst decision that I could make to go into the ministry. It thought it was a joke. And so there's been times in my life, and maybe you're not there now, but you have been, where what God's calling you to do is not in popular demand. And what's so, I think, hard about this, especially if you're Gen Z or a millennial, or you're a post-millennial, you're in high school, or you're raised on social media, is we tend to think that what's good and right is based on how many people like it. And so we throw something on the internet and we gauge how good it is based on how many likes or clicks or how much attention it got. But how many know that there's a path that God's called us to walk as Christians that is not a popular path? And it may mean leaving success in the eyes of the world to follow after this carpenter. And so it's hard to define legacy. I know it sounds glamorous, but there's times where you may be right in exactly where God has you, and it doesn't feel that way. And nobody understands why you're doing what you do. And maybe your kids don't understand why you're praying for them every night, and why you're trying to tell them we need to get in the Word and we need to read the Bible, or why your employees or this or that. You got all this drama and you feel like you got to explain yourself. Let me tell you something. You don't have to explain yourself to nobody. As a Christian, you should live for an audience of one. And if Jesus made it his mission to try to get everybody to understand why he was here and what he was doing, he would have never, ever accomplished what he was here to do. He was like, his recruiting methods were crazy. He would just walk up, hey, drop your nets and follow me. I'll make you a fisher of men, and walk right off. There was no convincing. There was no there was no, just, he knew what he was here to do. And even when he was misunderstood, he didn't let that stop him from fulfilling what he felt like God had called him to do, his Father. It's a beautiful thing. But I want to just encourage some of you. Like, you may feel like you're a million miles from your purpose because there's people in your life that don't like what you do, or don't like what you're about, or how you're going about what God's called you to do. But at the end of the day, you really only have to give an account to one person. And what you did with the time and talent and treasure that God gave you, I mean, it's good to have consultants and, right, there's wisdom in the multitude of counselors and safety, right? I'm totally for that. But there may just be a season in your life where you have to jump out of the boat and you're the only one willing to take that step. And all the other 11 were just sitting there talking about how crazy Peter was, because he was going to take this step of faith. And I want to encourage you. I want to try to motivate you to be crazy enough just to do that. Whatever that may be. And it's so hard to put it in a schematic. And there's no way to give three, I mean, there's principles, there's guidance. But I think every single person, God is calling you to live a life that's unique to you. And when we look at the life of Jesus, I think this was something that he thought about. There's got to be a reason why he gathered his disciples around him and asked, what is my legacy? What are people saying about me? But that's not really what I want to talk about this morning. What I really want to talk about is the end of that conversation. Verse 25. So this is a legacy question, and his disciples answer him. Peter understood what he was here to do. Peter knew exactly who he was. And then he gives some advice on how that we can do the same thing that he's doing. How that we can live into our legacy. How is that going to look and feel in these bodies that we're in? And this is the advice that Jesus gives to his disciples that I think that all of us can benefit from today. He says, you want to live a legacy? You want to find your life? Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. So what good will it be for someone to be successful at everything and gain the whole world, hit every goal in their life, but forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? Now, what does he mean by that? I don't know. Come back next week. Seriously. I am still trying to figure it out. The best that I can tell, seriously, I'm just going to level with you. I really don't know exactly. But I don't think he's telling us to live or to leave the life that God has called us to. I think he's calling us to be willing to leave the life that maybe we thought we were going to have. Have you ever woke up and you're driving to work and you're like, this is not where I seen myself at 37. You don't have to, don't raise your hand. Or you go home after work and you're exhausted and you've spent all day doing what you do. And it's just like, this is not the way that I envision things to be. Maybe I'm the only one. Okay. And I want to talk about this 3-letter word, because this is what I think Jesus is really saying here. That there's a life that we can live no matter what it is we do, no matter what it is that we lead. And there's this hidden world that he talks about. He calls it our soul. That to me, that's where the seed of desire sits, and that's what motivates every person. What you like and don't like, it's the real you. It's your soul. According to Jeremiah, it's the part of you that was with God before you put on this body. And it's the part of you that will go back to be with God when this body is laid in the ground. Paul said to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. It's the purest part of you, your soul. And there's a way to live this life where we almost disregard that part of ourselves. And I think what Jesus is saying here is if we want to find our life in God, we've got to be willing to leave the life that we maybe thought we were going to have. Or the life, or the version of life that we had envisioned when we were the captain of our own soul and thought that we were really steering the ship. And if you haven't found out yet, you're not. That even, and Jesus required this of all of his disciples. They left their lives. They left the tax collecting and the fishing, and they left those things to follow after Jesus with really no guarantee at all. It was a total instinctual thing. It was a total just, I don't know who this guy is, but I feel he's calling me to this life of meaning, and I'm going to follow after it the best that I can. And the problem comes, though, is that you can have two people that do the exact two things, and they're completely driven by different motives. Because at the time, Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and the Pharisees, who were the people that represented God at the moment, at that time in history, were totally driven by self-motivation. But their life on the outside was completely perfect. They were doing all the right things for all the wrong reasons. It's like you can have two employees that do the exact same thing every day, both successful, both get promoted, started at the bottom, and end up running the company one day. It's the story we all like, the story we want to hear. But one person was motivated by money and getting ahead and would do whatever he had to do to get the promotion. It would step on people and all that he cared about was getting to the top. But then you had another employee who came in with this mindset of, well, I think I'm here to serve other people. And I think I'm here to help the people that are around me every day. And I think I'm here to lay my life down for those that are around me. And both of these people end up getting promoted, and both of these people end up at the top, but one has a soul that's disheveled, and the other one has a soul that sleeps well at nights. And the driving force behind the one that just stepped on everybody they had to step on to get to the top is what I would call ego. Ego. Motivated, end up in the same place in life, but one, the driver's seat, what was at the center of what was pushing and promoting them was himself. And that is not popular preaching. And that is not, that's something that I still deal with every day, because pride is deceptive. It's like, how do I know when I'm in ego? How do I know when I'm, and the best acronym that I have found for ego, this is how I know when I'm making decisions based on ego, is because I'm edging God out. I know the Bible says this, but you don't know what they did to me. I know that this isn't right, but this one time I'm going to just cut a corner because I really need to close this deal. I really need, it's just a slowly drift where we're not really consulting with God anymore. It's not even in our vocabulary. We got our sights set on something higher. Does that make sense? And it's in our daily decisions. I don't think it's just like one-time decision that we make, and I'm just gonna live in my ego my whole life. Nobody does that. It's just the daily decisions that we make. It's a slow drift from God at the center, and then we just slowly put ourselves there. And if it's not good for me, I don't know if I want to be a part of it. And this is the life that Jesus is warning his disciples of. Because believe it or not, his disciples had a little bit of ego. Right before he went to the cross, one of the conversations they were having is with their parents, who's going to be the greatest? Jesus is heading to the cross, and they're like, well, who's going to get the CFO role? I want that corner office, right? I've been eyeing it the last 3 years. Everybody has ego. Everybody has that part of themselves that completely is not attuned to the needs of the people around them. And it's just, I just want what I want, and I'll get it however I need to get it. And we'll edge God out, and slowly but surely we drift. And when Jesus says that, what does it matter if you gain the world and lose your soul? That's not a destination, that's a diagnosis. Because somebody that lives that way can literally gain the whole world and they're not fulfilled. It's never enough. But there's a better way to live. And it's a hard way to live. And I don't think it comes naturally. I think what comes naturally is, one of the first words that we learn is mine. You know what I'm saying? Like we're just naturally geared that way. Like but as we grow older and as we realize, okay, we're not going to live forever, and I can't really take any of this stuff with me, whether my name's on it or not. But I think, we can shift from this ego-driven life to the same three letters, but I think this is the way that God wants us to live, is rather than edging God out when it comes to our daily decisions, but it's exalting God only. And it sounds, I think it's pretty, sometimes we overcomplicate it, but it's just, Lord, is this what you're calling me to do? Lord, God, am I supposed to sign this deal? Is this a good, I know it looks good on paper, but is this what you're calling me to do? That job, they called me back. The opening's there. I'm going to make more money, better benefits, but is this, God, is this what you're calling me to do? And it's a life that is centered around God and not me. And I wish that I could say I've batted 1,000 with that, but I haven't. Because even as a pastor, there's times where I'm asking myself, is this what God's calling me to do, or am I just running on ego here? I want a bigger church, more locations. This isn't just, this is across all spectrums of life. Do we really need more? And so when we settle in ourselves that we're going to live this way, it puts obedience in our hands and outcomes in God's hands. Because we were never meant to live with the pressure of life. That the big decisions, the heavy lifting, were created to put those things on God. I would love to write my life sentence, but my life is not my own. And I really want to live the life sentence that I feel like God has given me to live. And I like the way the writer of Romans puts it. It says, so this is how do we do this in a practical way? This is what I want you to do. God helping you. Just take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, you're eating, going to work, walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embrace what God does for you. Embracing the outcomes that he gives you. It's the best thing that you can do for him. What if my whole life, everything that I do, everything that you do, is just meant to be an offering to God? It's not for anyone else. It's not for me. It's not for you. It's not to make my mom happy or my dad happy. Love them. Love you, Mom. Right? It's not to like we put all these constraints. What if I looked at my life as my life is not my own, and everything I do, everything I put my time, talent, and treasure towards is an offering to him? It changes everything. So really the priority is no longer, there's a lot of stuff on the periphery, but I really, really, really want to honor God with what he's given me. I want to honor God with my life. And there's a gaining. Jesus is telling us here that there's a gaining that leads to losing, and there's a losing that leads to gaining. That the more that I lose my life in the bad 3-letter ego, edging God out, the more that I stop making decisions that way and say, all right, Lord, I just want to bring you glory. I just want to do what you've called me to do. I want to be who you've called me to be. I want to say what you've called me to say. The more that we can live in that vein every moment in the present, the more we're going to begin to see God work in our lives and the people around us. The more that we're going to leave a legacy well beyond anything that we could ever do in our ego over here. Because you can do a lot in ego. You can build a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, that's not where God's called us to live. And so we find our legacy. We find our legacy. We find who God's called us to be when we're willing to depart from a life that's centered around ourselves, around me. Now, it doesn't end there. One chapter over, and then we're going to pray together. It's really quiet in here. This is tough, I know. How did Jesus find his identity? And then I think this is really, really good here. There's two places where God speaks to his son in the New Testament, 2 times that God the Father speaks to Jesus the Son. One was at the beginning of his ministry, where he went from making chairs in the wood shop to miracles and signs and wonders for 3 years. The other time was right after this conversation, about 6 days, after he gathered his disciples around and said, "What are people saying about me?" And then he takes 3 friends up on a mountain. It is called the Mount of Transfiguration. And so Peter, James, and John, he didn't take everybody with him, but he had 3 close friends that he took with him. And they go up on a mountain, and the same 3 things that God the Father said to Jesus the Son when he came out of the River Jordan, when he was baptized, he says the same 3 things to him again. And they go up on the Mount of Transfiguration, and it sounds something like this. God the Father speaking to his Son, he says, "This is my Son, in whom I am very pleased, and whom I love. Listen to him." So they go up on the mountain. All right, we're talking about legacy. Jesus is asking questions like, "Who do people say that I am?" Nobody got it right but Peter. And then he takes him up on this mountain, and there's this moment where God speaks from heaven. Now keep in mind that Jesus knew he only had a few months left here on earth. Now keep in mind that even the people that were following him really didn't know exactly who he was. They misunderstood him. But what I love about this is it really has nothing to do with what Jesus, his vocation or his career. "This is my Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." It's acceptance, affection, and affirmation. And I think when it comes to living the life that God has called us to live, the best way that I can tell to do that is reminding myself, and you reminding yourself, that you've been designed to hear from God. That's what separates you from everything else on this planet. You have been designed. You have a soul, right? You're a soul that lives in a body, but at the deepest part of who you are, Jesus said things like, "My sheep will know my voice." And so how do I know that I'm on the right path? How do I know that I'm living this legacy, that I'm walking the journey that God's called me to walk? Well, in the critical moments of Jesus' life, his dad showed up. And not only did he show up, he spoke. And when I look back over my life, that's exactly how God has done it for me. In pivotal moments in my life, God has showed up and he has spoken. When people have misunderstood me, when I didn't even know what I was supposed to do in my life, like I'm just confused, don't quite know, that God in all his goodness, because ego can't hear from God, edging God out. That part of us, our flesh, can't hear from God. But that part of us, that spirit, that soul part of us that says, "I just want to exalt God," all it knows is God's voice. Come on, so all it knows is God's voice. And the more that we can live in that side of ourselves, because nobody's exempt from ego here. Like, I can snap right into it in a heartbeat. That's just me. But the more that we can say, "All right, Lord, I'm yours. What am I supposed to do with the next day I have, the next week I have, the next year I have? Maybe I have a decade. I don't know. Maybe I have 2 decades left. I don't know. But the best way to find your legacy is going to be revealed by listening to God. It's going to be revealed by listening to God. And he may confirm it through a pastor or a priest or a coach or a family member. But at the end of the day, I want you to hear this, and we're going to pray. And I know I've gone a little bit long, but God created you to hear him. You don't need a priest to help you do that. You don't need me to help you do that. You don't have to consult or phone a friend. That when it comes to the life that God's called you to live, you can trust his voice and his guidance and his instincts. And when I'm living in that mindset, God may call me to leave my job. God may call me to sell my practice and move to Portugal. God may call me to leave a job that I really liked, to go work somewhere that the first day I showed up, I cried. I was like, I made a huge mistake. I called my wife. I was like, I miss God. I want to go back to Pepsi. I cried leaving the office. I'm like walking down the office crying. I'm like, why am I doing this? But I was doing it because I felt like God had called me to do it. And my wife said it was okay. So those two go hand in hand. Come on, somebody, right? Yeah, they do. They really do. But let's just bow your head. We're gonna pray together. Because maybe there's some people in your life right now that are just misunderstanding you. You're not living the version of you that they wanted you to be. Or maybe you're fighting opposition right now, or maybe God's calling you to make a decision that just doesn't make any sense on paper. So Lord, we come together and we just ask again, as your children, that you would lead us with that still small voice. That we would slow down enough, get still enough to really listen for that. And so I pray for the people this morning that maybe you feel like you've never heard God's voice. But maybe it comes as an instinct. Maybe it comes through many different forms. But there's this unseen hand that governs the universe. And the more that we can make it our mission to bring him glory, the more we're going to hear and know. So Lord, I just pray that your voice would be loud in the hearts and the spirits of your people. Lord, I pray for just clear direction. And then God, I just ask that you would help us all to live a life that outlives us. By showing up wherever we show up on Monday morning with the mentality that I'm here to help, that I'm here to serve, I'm not here to be served, I'm here to serve. I'm here to lift up the people that are around me. Lord, help us to be aware and attuned to the needs around us, but most of all, to your voice in our everyday life. We just thank you so much. It's in Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said amen.